Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4, where things are going to be a little different this week. A little bit of a solo cast. I'll be talking to you one-on-one about in-season training and answering a question we got on Instagram. So let's get right into that. Ed asks if soccer players can work out after games the way he sees basketball players doing sometimes. This is an interesting question because I think first we should dive into why basketball players, basketball teams will use this as a strategy. And then we could talk about how maybe it may translate or not translate to a soccer environment. And after this, we're going to dive in a little bit more just to in-season training in general. So stay tuned for that. So first and foremost, the purpose of post-game workouts essentially come down to one, it's a free lift. When you're in season, there's going to be fewer opportunities to push the pace in the gym. And because the game day is such an intense part of the week anyways, you're not going to be impacting recovery. You're not going to be harming anything that follows by adding a little bit of stress after the game. The only exception to that would be if you were playing like a back to back, which NBA teams do often, but is probably not all that common in a lot of environments. So that would be the one exception. And in soccer, we'll talk about, midweek games and things like that. But reason number one, it's a free addition of another workout that you weren't going to have otherwise. The other reason is while fatigue can impact the effectiveness of especially things like speed and power and strength, the higher intensity activities, not so much the lower intensity like hypertrophy work or rehab and things like that. But while the productivity of it is a little bit lower, it's still a lot more productive than doing nothing at all. It's either make a little bit of progress towards this thing that is important to you, or none at all that day, essentially. Um, and in the case of the NBA, the reason that they're utilizing these post-game workouts is because their games come very, very frequently. And if you try to get your strength training in between those games, you essentially run into this problem where every day across the week is a high intensity day, or most of them, because the game day is obviously high, and then you're gonna strength train in between, which is a high intensity, and then you're gonna play, and there's never a low day for recovery, or at least a lot less of them. So if you can stack the high stress efforts on the same day, yeah, it's a little bit less ideal, again, like I said, in terms of the effectiveness, but the net positive is that you get real recovery. And when you're playing at a fast pace like that, that's probably the number one predictor of success, is who can recover and turn around and perform one day later, 2 days later, whatever the case is. So in a soccer environment, games are played a lot less frequently, typically once a week, or sometimes you get those twice a week, that midweek match, something like that. So if we take the once a week as a norm, as an example, you are going to get more opportunities to train these relevant qualities, the strength, the speed, the power, the rehab and hypertrophy and all the other things. You're going to get opportunities to train that in between the games. But as we'll discuss a little bit later, you're probably going to touch each of those things once or maybe twice. So by adding something after a match, you can essentially double the frequency that you're touching this quality. And if it's something that's very important to you in your game, whether it's making sure you don't get injured again, or if you need a little bit more speed to compete with the opposition, whatever the low hanging fruit or highest important the highest ranking important qualities to chase, uh, that's a great opportunity to chase it, and it will almost definitely enhance your um, achievement of that progress. So I think it's a really good idea, but let's get into a little bit of the nuance. I think one obvious one is your playing time. If you played all 90 minutes and you are spent, then you probably aren't in a place to get into some heavy strength training or some sprints or, things like that. Probably just not a good idea. But it does leave the door open for lower intensity activities like doing iso holds, which can be really good for the tendons, kind of a tendon health activity. You could also chase very specific hypertrophy. Maybe you've had an ankle injury or a hip injury, and you can do something that's of a higher rep range that will make a little bit of progress towards just strengthening that region that's a problem for you, and you'll be better for it at the end. So it's not an all or nothing. It's kind of sitting back and considering what is trainable on that day. If playing time was lower, I think you definitely go get after it, because most of the time it's very challenging for a coach to keep the low playing time players up to par with the players that are playing a lot more. Even if there's extra fitness involved in practice the next couple of days, oftentimes you still end up with a little bit of a gap where you can run into situations where you're falling behind a little bit in terms of fitness and things like that. So one, you'll have the energy to do it, and it's only going to serve you in keeping up with the players that are playing more than you or played more than you that week. And if you've got big goals into earning more playing time or playing at the next level or whatever the case is, I definitely wouldn't waste those days. I know it gets tricky with the logistics of things sometimes. If a game is really late and now you're sacrificing sleep to stay back and do a workout, that can be a problem. Or even just the location, the equipment, if you train at a different facility or if you work out at a different facility and it's not open that late, or you can't get to it after the game. Obviously, those are all kind of deal breakers sometimes, but back to the whole ISO holds and kind of specific rehabilitation work and things like that. There's a lot. You can also do body weight. And as I'll show in a minute here, you can also do speed work, plyometrics, things like, especially if playing time was lower. These are things that don't require any equipment. You can maybe do them on the field after the match or something of the sort. And I think that would be really advisable. So my recommendation would be think about what your specific goals are, whether it's getting faster, getting stronger, bringing up some of these weak points or problem areas if you've had past injuries, things like that. And just get clear on what it would be you would spend more time working on given these opportunities after games. And if you have that plan in place, then you're not finishing the game and then second guessing or, trying to figure things out on the spot. Like, it would be good to have a vision and a plan. And then the second part of that recommendation is be ready to be adaptable. Because if you play a lot, then your plan might go out the window. Or on just a given day where energy is lower, you're not feeling well, that could be another reason to just say, hey, I'm going to take my foot off the gas a little bit here and prioritize the recovery so I'm good to hit the week of training hard. But definitely consider it as an option if logistically it makes sense and all the rest. I want to transition now into a program, a manual that's available on the website, and it's my in-season manuals, maximizing in-season development. Because one, it gets into game day workouts for basketball and soccer, but it also covers the week of training in between. So when it comes to the match day stuff, the way that I presented it in here, and of course you can change things depending on how you're feeling and your situation and things like that. But the recommendation I gave was if you didn't play or played very little, you essentially repeat the match day -3 strength focus session. And a quick review, the structure that I put in this program is the same that I mentioned 1 or 2 episodes ago, talking about in-season weekly structures, which is match day, recovery, potentiation, strength, volume, speed, potentiation again, and then the next match. And then that would be the cycle, assuming it's a 1 match a week kind of schedule. This manual goes into how to adjust those weeks if you only have 3 days between games or things like that. It gives you the whole blueprint. But if we operate under this 1 match a week assumption, then no playing time or very little, you can repeat that match day -3 strength session. If you played less than half the match, but something substantial, maybe 30, 40 minutes, then you would repeat the match day +3 -4 volume session. So lower intensity, but pursuing that volume. If you played the whole game or at least more than a half, then you can go through the recovery protocols that are in here. So that's what I laid out, and you could kind of adjust things. You could say, I still want to do that volume session, even if I play 75 minutes, by all means. But this was the framework that's laid out here, and that's available. And then if you skip over to that section of the manual, there's workouts listed for all those days that you can just plug and play where you need them. Speaking of which, if we show, I know it was an example for something on match day, but you can implement speed stuff especially if playing time was quite low. This is just an example of a match day -2 speed, where this is the kind of thing I would be pursuing on a day like that. So the way things are split up in this manual is I give you the minimum effective dose, as in if you only have time to get a little bit of work in, do this. Do that, get out, you're good to go. There's the suggested work that I think would be highly recommended to do. And then if you're itching to do a little bit extra, then by all means, I give you options for that. And every day of the week is laid out exactly the same, where it's a small dose of something that'll be effective but quick. And then there's more that you can add depending on resources and time, energy, things like that. So yeah, I hope this was helpful to get a look at kind of what an in-season workout might look like, especially on like a match day -2, getting close to the game. In this example, we're chasing top speed, acceleration, some plyometrics, and even some loaded plyometrics in there in the extra column. So these are all things that, I mean, some of you may be shying away from in season, but as long as they're planned out correctly, you can get really effective doses of a lot of these things year round, and comparing that to just prioritizing them in the off season, you can imagine how over years of your playing career, this is a game changer for your long-term development. So if you're interested, on the website, both basketball and soccer versions are for the Maximizing In-Season Development manual are on there. And again, they walk you through the weekly structure, how to plan everything out, how to adjust the plan depending on how many days are between games. And then I didn't even touch on this today, but it gives you both the strength training and the skill development suggestions, including drills, sets, reps, all the rest, so that everything you're doing extra matches with the loading parameters of the week. So I'd highly recommend that. I think you should check that out. And I hope this is really helpful. So send any more questions. You got my way. I appreciate the question that sparked the conversation today. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.